Hey, welcome to World Breach Report number 10. Double digits, baby. We made it all the way up to number 10, which means that you've listened to about 10 hours of me trying as hard as I can to convince you of some relatively crazy stuff. And, you know, it's only going to get crazier from here. We're going to be building crazy on top of crazy. But the difference is that I'm going to be trying to link this crazy together. Why don't you come along? And we'll see what kind of bad habits we can develop along the way. What do you say? Being a monster hunter is not anything if it cannot be fun. So that's my general idea. And as well to that, thank you very much to everyone who has liked, shared, and subscribed. Make sure you try to infect as many people with this sort of my ideas as I've got. I appreciate everyone who's been sharing. And really, the last few World Breach episodes have been really moving. Like, holy cow. I mean, everybody's coming back really quick, and I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Also, the Discord channel is a great place for everyone to connect. It's pretty refreshing to be able to get in there and to see everybody and, you know, the regulars that are there and building a real community. That is really what all this is about for me. As I'll be talking about in this show, and more than just shameless plugs of, you know, Audible audiobooks and my Discord server. But incidentally, I mean, audiobooks are pretty great. I'm just not going to lie. If you can find me a cheaper way to get audiobooks that's legal, because remember, YouTube, and, you know, I have to say all the right things. And man, did I ever get a bunch of flack over the last couple of episodes where I was talking about, like, no guns, no more guns. You need to understand that I am actually in Canada. Like, that's where I live. And in Canada, we're going through some pretty crazy stuff right now. So, you know, you could like guns, you could not like guns, but pretty much you have to tell everybody that you don't like guns because, well, you know, there's a whole new world order that's kind of happening up here. And, yeah, we all just got to try to stay. I don't like to get into politics that much, and you can't really talk about guns without talking about politics. But I definitely don't want this channel to turn into a focus about guns, even though the word hunts is in the title. The hunting we do is going to be more with video cameras to get evidence, you know. And honestly speaking, and this is a conversation I've had with my good buddy Tall J, who is a BFRO investigator, and we've talked about the idea of, like, shooting one, you know, like, what if you could kill a Bigfoot? Which I think is an exceptionally bad idea. It's the same way I think that shooting at these UFOs and getting their technology, that is also an exceptionally bad idea. Because if you see one and you shoot it and you happen to kill it, then, you know, what if he's got friends? And incidentally, these things throw, you know, fastball rocks the size of, you know, basketballs that will essentially kill you. Body armor isn't a thing. And, yeah, so, you know, I don't think you really pack enough ammo. Like, getting into a violent altercation in giant monsters wearing ghillie suits out in the middle of the bush is not a good idea, okay? Generally speaking. Now, that said, you know, if you're defending yourself in the wilderness and you have to do what you got to do, that's one thing. But let's all think about this as an exfiltration strategy. But I digress. The point is that we talk about many tools here. And the number one rule, of course, is to come back. All monster hunters come back. There should be no monster hunters on a missing 411 file. So, you know, comms, moving in groups, making sure that you talk with people, making sure that people understand where you're going. Even if you have to go somewhere alone, then, you know, that's why the Discord channel is there. So you can tell people what the op is, what you're doing. And, you know, if you don't come back, we can have some quick reaction forces get out there and try to help you out. Which we don't actually have a quick... Well, that's not true. That's not true. Lime Green Medic offered to be a quick reaction force for his general area. And he's the kind of guy I'd want to have coming for me if I was like, hey, locked in a cabin, large creatures, you know, Dogman's trying to eat the door. He's one of those kind of guys I'd want to have show up. But again, that's pretty much true for any of my American fans who I talk to. You know, I'm just sort of like the drastically unarmed neighbor who's up north. But I would be if I was allowed. But I'm not allowed. So, you know, there it is. But anyway, let's get into some of the reports that I've got to talk to you about today. And one of the big things that we're going to be talking about, well, you'll just see. First of all, let's talk about when we talked about in World Breach number 7. If you haven't seen World Breach number 7, I definitely recommend you check that out. But we talked about MH Flight 370. And when you watch MH Flight 370, you'll see that there was a video shot of these orbs from satellite, because there's satellite reconnaissance of the entire planet. And the satellite watches these three orbs, like, come up to this aircraft that's having a fire in its hold, which is MH370, And Ashton Forbes breaks this right down. Like, this is his jam. I'm not, you know, the guy's got a big brain on Brad. I can't, you know, not claiming to put words in his mouth. But as I understand it, unless I'm drastically wrong here, the orbs come in and you can see them spiraling around the ship. And it's pretty compelling footage. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go back and check out World Breach number 7. Because, yeah, that's kind of what's happening here. And then the whole plane does the funky teleport. And that's disconcerting, to say the least. But I came across this report from Australia, which I thought was really interesting. And you'll see what I mean here. But this is about a guy named Frederick Valentich, okay? And he was an aspiring commercial pilot with about 150 hours of flight time. And on a fateful October evening, he was flying a Cessna 182L from Melbourne to King Island at 7:06 p.m. Valentich radioed Melbourne Flight Service to report something unusual. What followed was a 7-minute transmission that has mystified researchers for decades. Valentich reported that an unidentified aircraft was following him at 4,500 feet. When asked to identify it, he stated it was 4 bright lights and appeared to be playing some kind of game with him. Then the craft allegedly orbited above him at tremendous speed. Now, that's an interesting thing, because when you watch the MH370 video, that's exactly what these orbs did. They began to orbit around the craft moving above him. And that was really interesting. And then the speeds that seem impossible for conventional aircraft. He described the objects as not an aircraft, reported that it was hovering above him, it was moving around him. His voice grew increasingly anxious, because, you know, that would freak you out. And he said that the engines sounded different than a normal aircraft, which, I mean, normally UFOs don't produce noise. Then came his haunting words, it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. His final transmission was at 7:12, reported the strange aircraft was hovering above him and he was experiencing engine trouble, and the last sounds recorded were described as metallic scraping sounds of an unknown origin. And then he's gone. Totally gone. And I thought that was really interesting, because when you listen to that report from Australia, it just goes to show that you just shouldn't go to Australia. I mean, they got sharks that'll kill you in the land, they've got things that'll kill you in the water, and they've got stuff apparently that'll teleport your butt from the air. But no, seriously, I'm sure the good people of Australia are tougher than I am. And the fact that this actually occurred, all humor aside, kind of reminded me quite a bit of MH Flight 370. So maybe that, you know, is tied into this somehow. Why would that have occurred? So it's funny, because I'm kind of into this stuff, and I'd never heard of this particular case. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? I mean, there's guys like Coast to Coast and everybody who's constantly trying to keep the ball rolling. You know, we're telling stories and stuff like that. And before it was views, it was listeners. And before it was listeners, it was ratings. And everybody's trying to, you know, keep the attention. So sometimes I wonder, who's actually got a theory here? Like, who's actually trying to get to the bottom of it? And the funny thing is if you tie yourself to a theory, like I have with breach theory, you're invariably going to be attacked by cowards who don't have any theory of their own. So, like I said, there's only 2 ways you can really grow. You can either, you know, have a theory and try to build something, or you can attack people and tear it down. And I just don't have time for people that attack you to tear stuff down. Like, if it's constructive and you're like, hey man, what about this? Doesn't this fly in the face of your theory? That's a totally different attitude. That's a totally different thing. And we all know that. We all know that. We can all see that. But there's a sick delight from these arsonists and vandals who come in and they destroy people's careers, destroy people's lives. And I'm not the only one that's noticed this. I mean, if you've got 2 eyes and any sort of sense of what's going on, and you see what's happening inside this space, there's always these reoccurring, you know, and they'll hyperturn terms like debunkers and skeptics who revel and relish in attacking people. And if they're rejected and they're beaten back, they're just like, oh, well, hey, man, I'm just asking questions. You're the one with the theory. And that's why Jacques Vallée now holds way back, and he doesn't really come forward with too much, because I'm sure he doesn't want to get into knife fights anymore. You know, because I'm sure he could bring some serious force to bear. It's like when Candace Owens has this thing she says, you know, we don't know, but we know. And there's a lot of people that attack her for saying that. But I think everybody watching this knows what's going on, you know? Like, if somebody's cheating on their wife, you don't know, but you kind of know. You know what I mean? You can see it, and then sooner or later, oh, my suspicions were confirmed. How is that? You know, like, So you can't just exist in a world where it's only the factual. I mean, you have senses, you have hunches, you have, mounting evidence that you don't understand. And even circumstantial evidence is, in fact, evidence. And there's one of the major things that is bothering me, and one of the themes of this particular show is consciousness. Consciousness is a pretty important thing, and that is within your mind. And for years, the only thing that really was a gateway that you could improve yourself and was non-judgmental. You could do it without feeling you were in a pack or you had to agree or be peer pressured, because the internet is full of peer pressure. Like, it's full of it. Immediately after someone makes a video, you look at the comments, who agrees, who disagrees, and it becomes this weird sort of like peer pressure democratic process on the truth, which is ridiculous. And what didn't used to be like that was books. When you read a book, and even to this day when you read a book, it's a spiritual connection, really, between you and the author. You're looking at dots on a page and you hear a voice in your head, which that by itself is pretty wild when you think about it. But there is no third party. It's a very, very intimate connection with what they called in the 13th Warrior, words that stay. So I think that books, of course, like everything that's on the internet has to be put there, and it's taken from books. And it's just like when you have music. They used to have 8 tracks and records, and they went to 8 tracks, and I went to tapes, and then I went to CDs, and now it's all MP3s. But not everything makes the jump. There were records that were made that never got made into 8 tracks, that never got made, never got put on there. But books, they kind of had an ability to stay there, so you could reach back and find knowledge that goes all the way back, like the greats have, like John Keel, like Jacques Vallée. And now, because of the fire hose of data, of brain rot that's coming towards us, we stop and we don't look back behind us at all this other information that has not been put online. It hasn't been bridged over so you have access to it. So you have to become responsible for that. And, they'd love to get it so that, no one can have the truth. Like when Amazon pulled George Orwell's 1984 out of everyone's Kindle. That got memory hold, but that happened. They didn't have the rights for it, so suddenly everyone who downloaded George Orwell's 1984, it was suddenly gone, which could you think of a better title to have that happen with? But, and the Kindles, even then, the Kindles, everyone's like, I don't know, Kindles, something about the Kindle kind of rubs me the wrong way, because you don't own it. You can't physically look at it. It's not Y2K compliant, as I'm fond of saying. And I think that's because we're losing our souls to something I call is the worm. W-Y-R-M, the worm. And the worm, to me, is this corruption that, this could be a throwback to some of the White Wolf stuff I used to read. They have like 3 gods that are like the negative ones, but I'm totally misrepresenting them. But they have a god called the Worm as well. And of course, they've been talking about the Worm of Midgard. And there's a bunch of different terms of the worm. But the worm that I'm talking about is this strange technological slavery, this corruption that seems to be infecting us from this infrastructure that's masquerading as convenience, but is actually this strange enslaving poison, a drug, which is making us weaker every day and is denying that it's doing it. So one of the evidence of this, of the worm, is this story I found where almost a third of children who started reception, and I guess that's like kindergarten, last year were not able to use books correctly. Now, that's terrifying to me. Around 1 in 4 were not toilet trained, amid warnings that more children are struggling with basic life skills. Annual survey of primary school staff in the early years of the Kindred Squared, of early years charity Kindred Squared, teachers estimated 26 to 36% of the children in their class this year were having frequent toilet mishaps. Staff also reported about 28% of the children started school unable to eat or drink independently. And they said that over half the staff said the children's parents said that the children's and parents excessive screen time was a key factor in children not being ready for school. Now, there's all kinds of problems about school, and the whole system that it was all based on. We're enslaving these people, and the education system is kind of a nightmare to start with out of the gate. But if you can't read a book, and children can't read books, that is terrifying. Now, I, myself, don't have any kids, but if I did have kids, and if you do have kids, you should read to your kids with a book. You should go in there, turn off whatever it is they're looking at, and read to them. So you spend time with them and they get used to the ideas of things coming to books. Unless, of course, they've already got their cell phones, because now they're getting these kids who are like 5 and younger with cell phones, and then they're so hooked to these things that they're not interested in anything that's going around them in the real world. And that is the ultimate corruption of the worm, what I call the corruption of the worm. And it's sick. And it's nothing good will come of it. It is going to make a race of slaves and people who are easily controlled. And beyond, I mean, if you think that I'm nuts because of, well, Sean, whatever, he thinks there's dimensional, breaches and worlds where things are crossing. Yeah, it gets better. I'm going to lay some more stuff on you this episode that you're going to be like, what? But yeah, no, really, there's some problems here with this stuff. So I'm sure we can all agree that children should be able to read books, though. I mean, you could find the most hardcore debunking skeptic clown you could ever come across, and they would have to agree that, books are something we should be able to read. Of course, there's always going to be dudes who are like, well, why though? Because, you can always you're being a Luddite. I don't think so, homie. I don't, because someday the power is going to go off. And if you're not going to be able to handle that, then you've enslaved yourself and you've sort of vicariously connected yourself to a larger world. This idea I talked about a few episodes ago about, having your brain lobotomized. You should increase your brain. Your brain is more complicated than anything that you outsource your memory to. You need to improve that. And that is very critical. Don't let the worm into your brain, is where I'm going with this. Now, there have been cases in the reason why things are called Fortean events, like Forteana. It all comes from this guy named Charles Fort. I may have talked about him before. He's this dude, went to the library. Libraries are the places where we have books. And in these libraries, and he looked at a lot of news reports, because that was the internet before there was the internet, was just newspapers. And he would find these reports that were written by people who were, sending out these reports about all kinds of very bizarre things that didn't fit with science. And he began to come to the conclusion that he thought science was a kind of imagination control. It was the early stages of the worm, this corruption that keeps us from seeing the world how it truly is. But in 2021, now one of the Fortean events that is like a quintessential Fortean event is raining fish. It rains fish, sometimes worms, sometimes blood. And you're like, what is that? Well, in 2021, an event occurred during a severe storm that hit Texarkana on the late afternoon of December 29th. And the story was well covered in the Texarkana Gazette. The story got wide U.S. coverage, but most outlets simply repeated the same materials of the Texas stations. On social media, the story exploded. Facebook and Instagram, dozens of people shared the story, images and videos of fish they had found in their homes and businesses, this was fish raining. It was caught on security cameras where it was raining and these fish would fall from the sky. And the type of fish they were called, they were all threadfin shad, which is a freshwater fish. And that's super weird. And the going theory, of course, is that these small pelagic freshwater forage fish were scooped up by a tornado, thrown into the sky, and then were dropped on Texarkana because there was these storms. They suck up the fish fall. There it is. Sure. I'm like, on its face, that seems pretty good. I would ask why there isn't more kinds of fish, because if it's a freshwater fish, there should be more fish, like maybe some trout or something should also fall. But the point of the story here is not to say that, well, that's all means they're coming through a world breach. No, that's not what this means. It's entirely possible they were sucked up by some sort of whirlwind tornado type thing, I suppose. Sure. I mean, it seems kind of plausible, I guess. It does seem a little weird. I have some questions about it. But that's the only other explanation I could go with. But the point is that these reports where people would laugh at them and say, it didn't rain fish, shut up. No, clearly it did. We have records of that just happening. Much like, the footage we have of the crazy ball lightning, which people are seeing. And when you compare that with all these other reports that people have made over years, you begin to realize that there's something to this. There's something more than what's being presented to us. And there's the corruption that's trying to stop us from seeing what's actually going on in the world around us. Now, there's those movies that came out back in the 80s called Poltergeist, which I highly recommend. And my favorite of the series, a side note, is Poltergeist 2, because there's this old priest in there. Oh, he's amazing. And the guy, like, died, like, very shortly after making it. He was a film actor. And he is incredible. I mean, they didn't even have to do makeup on this guy. He played this, like, skeletal priest-type dude. The movie is terrifying to this day. And I always respect scary movies where they can make stuff scary. Like, it's easy to make things scary if you're, like, dark and in close, like in a graveyard. I mean, that's really easy to make that stuff scary. But it's really hard to be on, like, a public street and, you know, there's a crowd of people around and something happens that's truly terrifying. And Poltergeist 2 does that. You need to check that movie out. Definitely, you know, the Poltergeist series is pretty fun. And it's got that little, you know, it's the beast girl. You know, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So poltergeists are the idea of a noisy ghost, is what a poltergeist is. And they invariably, historically, they all occur with the idea that there's usually a young person present, usually somebody who's going through puberty, and there's these strange events that happen in their home or in their house around them, but there's almost always a child present. And these are these bizarre paranormal events that occur, and they happen quite frequently. Now, in Western countries, we wouldn't report that stuff because everyone's afraid of what? Ridicule, because, you know, we all live in the validation sphere where everyone's got to talk about this stuff. Of course, you know, now with the internet, that's starting to move around more and more. But I found a great summary online, which I've linked to, of course, from 2024 to 2025 of different poltergeist attacks. I'm just going to cover some of these, and a lot of these come from countries where they're a lot more connected to spiritualism, usually countries that are far more ancient than ours, have, I mean by North American, I'm a Canadian, you know, Canada and America, the ancient, you know, First Nations, they were all very spiritual people. You can't tell me the Aztecs and those guys weren't spiritual. They were doing crazy stuff in order to be spiritual, but that's another video. So when you get to places like India, things get pretty wild over there. What people are reporting. On July 2024 in India, in a name of a district, you'll have to go to the website because, I mean, these got like 37 letter long words. Residents were living in constant fear for over 10 days due to hails of stones that spontaneously struck their homes once darkness set. In July, also in India, a family reported that their house mysteriously ignited more than 15 separate times within 48 hours. Now, spontaneous fires is a major thing that happens with poltergeist activity. Super terrifying. What is that? Other than the fact that fire by its essence is kind of plasma. I don't really know what's going on there. In Swaziland, a family led by a mother named Jackie experienced a series of terrifying supernatural events centered around her 13-year-old son. There's the kids. The phenomena included stones flying through the air without visible source, lights flickering on and off, electricity, always a problem, and mysterious overturn of pots containing cooking food. More sinister occurrences involved human waste being left on beds. That's going too far now. That's just, well, it's crappy. The family home being turned into a general mess, and unseen forces allegedly snatching JAMA's school books and throwing them into the river. Best homework excuse ever. Sorry, couldn't do my assignment because demonic attack. Yeah, you know, some mileage may vary, but that's kind of a wild report, though. But it goes on. In October of 2024 in India, residents of Nagar in the Aliapur police station reported stones raining onto their house roofs every night for 1.5 months. Like, 1.5 months? That's like 40, 50 days? Seems kind of wild. Also in India, a guy named Singh and his family reported that a fire broke out mysteriously between 30 and 40 times in various locations over their home in their 2-day period. What is that? Why are these fires just rapidly appearing in their homes? Seems kind of strange. In Zimbabwe, a woman identified as Mai fled her rented apartment after reporting a horror haunting where mysterious stones constantly rained on the roof of the building. Which, I don't know if it was raining on the roof of the building. I probably wouldn't stay in the... I'd probably stay in the building. Like, if there's stones falling and the roof is stopping them, I'd probably stay there. That's just me, though. That's just me. And then, these are just the highlights. It goes on and on and on. A guy named Shetty in India and his family were forced to abandon their home after experiencing a series of unexplained disturbances that primarily occurred after nightfall. Reported phenomena included clothes spontaneously catching fire. That would be unnerving. Utensils falling without assistance, objects moving on their own, and disappearance of sacred items and gold ornaments. That's pretty wild, you know? So are all these people lying? I mean, the skeptics would be like, oh, whatever. Those Indians, what do they know? Well, first of all, you want to know what like actual racism looks like? That's what actual racism looks like. When you look at people that come from a different culture and they're telling you what they believe to be true and you're just dismissing them because they're some foreigner who doesn't believe what you believe, that's, I mean, I don't like to throw the word racism around, but that's pretty brutal, man. Like, that's pretty brutal. Why don't you give these people a chance to explain what they're seeing? Because maybe this is happening in their world because of how their consciousness operates. They're able to have different experiences than what you're operating with. Maybe the world isn't actually as locked down as we think it is over here in the wild, wild west, you know? And it kind of makes me feel pretty good because otherwise it's all just materialistic reductionism. It doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want. Who cares? Who cares? You're not more than your physical body. You're just a piece of meat. You're going to die and you're going to rot in the ground and nothing is going to change. Yeah. See, the problem is we got like crap like this on my bed. You know? What is that? Well, it's all a lie. All of it? All of it? Because this is just 1 year and there's way more reports coming. So they're all lying. Everybody's lying. You know, to make themselves a laughingstock. Like, what possible gain could they have? Why would they do that? It doesn't make sense. Someone, like, we don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. Okay, I mean, I have theories about stuff. Everybody's got theories. But nobody knows for sure what all of this stuff means. Now, Tibet used to be in the news when Tibet was, you know, sort of invaded by China and sort of annexed, and Tibet sort of lost everything that was going on there. And there's some stuff that was going on in Tibet that I didn't agree with. Like, one of the things was inherited debt. So that when, you know, if you died and somebody else was born, they claimed that there was a reincarnated person, and that person automatically, because they're this person reincarnated, they reincarnated with their debt. Which, I mean, wow, that's brutal. You know what I mean? But so there's corruption that occurs in every system. No system is completely lovely and nice and wonderful. So the Tibetans had their problems too. But be that as it may, these guys have been studying the whole concept of consciousness probably longer than anybody. Maybe guys in India, because India goes way back. I mean, we don't even know how far back India goes. But I would say that the stuff that's going on in Tibet is pretty old. And they have this, I came across this documentary that was made in 2022, which I've linked to. You can watch it for free. Of course you can. Called Tukdam. Tukdam. I've linked to it. Between Worlds. This is some wild stuff, man. And the feature documentary explores a phenomenon that blurs life and death to an unprecedented degree. And what Tibetan Buddhists call Tukdam. These are advanced meditators die in a consciously controlled manner. Whoa. So that's quite the way to check out. Though dead, according to our biometric standards, they often stay sitting upright in meditation. Remarkably, their bodies remain fresh and lifelike without signs of decay for days, sometimes weeks after clinical death. So what is that? Follow groundbreaking scientific research into Tukdam after taking us into the intimate death stories of Tibetan meditators. The film juxtaposes scientific and Tibetan perspectives as it tries to unravel the mystery of Tukdam. Now, that is something. I don't know what that is, but it's here's what we know about that. Okay, it's related to consciousness, that's for sure, and life and death, and that we're more than our physical body, because that's what that would say to me. That's what that is. So clearly, consciousness is a much bigger deal than we have been led to believe. And when you look at all the social media and the internet, even this video, even with what I'm doing, I'm trying to control your attention. I'm trying to talk to you. I'm trying to get people to watch me, and, you know, maybe I'll be able to do more research on this stuff. I mean, everybody's got their own motivations for it. Some people are trying to control you to make you watch them because they want to take all your money, you know, like televangelists or, I don't know, whoever else, Teletubbies. No, well, I don't know. I'm sure Teletubbies are perfectly nice. Well, not really. They're kind of creepy. I don't know. Just to me, personal thing, Teletubbies kind of make me go over the front side a bit. But Clearly, though, we can all agree that this sort of thing is pretty clearly meaning that we're more than our physical bodies. That our consciousness, and what is consciousness? Is that your thoughts? Is it your logos? Is it your mind? Is it what you believe? You know, Rupert Sheldrake's done a bunch of work on this too. And it's all of these things, I think. I think it's all of these things. It's kind of a hard thing to sort of put your finger on exactly. And even science can't explain consciousness. Sure, there's dudes who'd be like, oh no, we got it all figured out, you know, because you cut the part of the brain away. But I don't think so. And the overarching information that I've had thrown down to me is that we're basically kind of like receivers and repeaters. And you know what I mean? Like we can boost the signal. So we're like a radio that can tune in, and we can make our own frequencies with our brain, and we can broadcast these frequencies if we know how to do it. And this is what like telepathy and consciousness and the interaction of consciousness is with this meat bag we call the physical body. And I'm giving you, like, this is not my theory, okay? I'm sort of boiling down all a bunch of other theories in a super simple way to be like, yeah, essentially you're, you know, a meat bag who's got a bunch of information in your brain, and you're able to sort of like tune in like a radio, which comparing your brain to a radio is just a ridiculous thing to do. And yeah, but I mean, you need a model somehow. Everybody's super keen to compare consciousness to, you know, computers and whatnot. Everyone's really keen to. My little Josephine dog is coming up to say hello. Hello from Josephine. But consciousness, which is present inside animals, which is present inside of all sentient things, is got to mean something. And of course, this is going to do all kinds of problems. This is why, like, you know, vegetarianism is kind of one of these things that makes me go, ooh, yeah. So if things are conscious, should we be eating this much meat? And that's an uncomfortable thing to think about. Like, I like eating meat. You know what I mean? Like, I like steak. I do. I like burgers. I do. But, you know, if it forces you to ask questions that maybe you don't want to answer. But, you know, does it matter if you eat meat? Because if we're all more than our physical bodies and all this is reincarnated, you start getting into spiritual practices and ideas about all this stuff. It gets kind of wild. There's some stuff that kind of makes you go, oh, I don't know. What are you doing? Cut it out, little rat. That's my dog, who I call a little rat. But I'm allowed to, because I love her. And incidentally, speaking of consciousness, I mean, anybody who's ever owned a pet, or a dog, or a cat, or anything like that, they know for sure that these are not just, you know, these skeptics are like, oh no, these are just animals that are reacting on instinct. They don't have a personality. They don't have a brain or whatever. That's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. And there's a lot of, what? Are you not going to be happy unless you come up and say hello? Is that what's going on here? Huh? Josephine, say hello to everybody on the interwebs. There they are. Yes. Yes. Josephine, as a side note, is my little protector who showed up in my life, who I rescued. And she is part Basenji and part Beagle. And the killer bees, which means she's totally untrainable. Like, you cannot train this dog. She's just a wreck. Are you done now? Are you done? Can I finish the show? Thank you very much. Oh, there you are. Get out of it, you little rat. All right. So the point is that consciousness is super duper important. Consciousness is one of these things that we have to be aware of in our lives, and we're not. And the worm, the idea of the internet and of things that are affecting our consciousness, seems to draw you away from that. They want to make you believe that there is no greater connection. Like, do you remember when they used to talk about how love was the key to everything? Like, the feeling of being in love. And if you've never been in love, let me tell you, there's a lot of power in that. Like, some people, I remember they came up with this thing saying, oh, love is like just a chemical thing that happens. It goes on every couple of years, like it only lasts 2 years, but it's this chemical infatuation in your brain and all that kind of jazz. I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that. And I think there are, like, people who are connected on a deeply, deeply spiritual level who there's a bridging that occurs there. And their lives, their consciousnesses mingle. The idea of soulmates. I mean, there's poetry and songs and things written about this. It's all very, It's been going on since the dawn of time. They talk about it in the Bible. They talk about it in all the holy books. So everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong. And what does all of this have in common? It has consciousness. That's what it has in common. Now, to go with this, there's a guy named Bill UHOUSE, or UHOUSE? I'm not really sure how you say his last name. But he's this guy who, once again, was a whistleblower, came forward, and researchers cite testimonies by several whistleblowers as proof of an ongoing work at Area 51 to reverse engineer alien propulsion technology. One of the whistleblowers was Bill UHOUSE. I'll call him UHOUSE because I don't know how to say his name. A man in his 70s now who claimed he worked from 1966 through to 1979 as an engineer at the top-secret Area 51 facility in collaboration with a gray alien. According to UHOUSE, who passed away in 2009, he worked as a mechanical engineer at Area 51 with the alien known as J-Rod. Now, people who are familiar with this lore, for lack of a better term, they know that there was apparently an alien that was recovered named J-Rod who is helping us figure out stuff, which I think he probably wasn't helping us figure out stuff. He was probably a prisoner, and he's probably being interrogated. And, I don't understand why, like, even to this day, they seem to be shooting down these craft and attacking these craft, which to me sounds like, again, like shooting Bigfoot, kind of a bad idea. He claimed that he worked with J-Rod to construct a flight simulator for the training of Air Force pilots who would fly advanced USAF stealth reconnaissance craft developed through reverse engineering studies of alien UFOs. That's kind of wild stuff. So, that's interesting on its own. But then Grant Cameron, in my next link, he talks about how to pilot UFOs and UAPs from all the reports that he's come across. Good Canadian kid, Grant Cameron. Where you begin to realize that, now he wrote a book called Contact Modalities. And the whole book is filled with these ways that you can somehow get in touch with these outworld intelligences. And this starts to sound pretty occulty, pretty fast. Things start getting kind of like, what do you, like, we have this thing where we want to be able to contact stuff like through a telephone or through email or something like that, which is funny. And then when you hear about people getting phone calls from the great beyond or whatever, they're like, oh, they can't do that. Well, how are they supposed to contact you then, bro? Like, how's that supposed to happen? Is contact possible? Our brains say no. Our brains say that no, there shouldn't be any contact possible at all because you die, you're dead, that's it, game over. Because if that's not the case, then I might get judged for some of the things I've done in my life, and I've been a pretty terrible person. Yeah. Well, if consciousness is a thing, which clearly it is, and these beings tend to communicate with us using mental phenomenon like telepathy, which is just mind-to-mind communication in some form or another, that would make sense that your interface with some alien craft or some sort of spiritual machine, for lack of a better term, would probably have to rely on that same technology. Definitely check out this interview, and you begin to see a trend forming here. You begin to see this all happen. You remember the ideas of familiars? Animals that were spiritually connected to their witches? Where would we be now if it wasn't for the Inquisition just murdering people who had these natural abilities, maybe even these genetic abilities across Europe, because they killed a bunch of them. Maybe some of them actually had abilities, and by removing them from the gene pool because of, instructions they got from some sort of beings trying to control us, we wound up being like chickens having their wings clipped. And that's why chickens can't fly. It's because they forgot how to, and they forgot the fact that they're even birds. Yeah. Seems to make sense to me. Now, the thing that came out last year, and if you have not looked at this, this is by far one of the craziest series on YouTube. It flared up. Some people talked about it. This should have gotten worldwide recognition. This is nuts to see this. And it's one of the most intense things that of anything I've told you to look at. You really need to check out this series called The Telepathy Tapes. Now, there's 2 seasons. I'm only talking about the first season here, okay? Because in the first season, what they did was they essentially discovered that nonverbal autistic children are able to use telepathy, are psychic. And a lot of people talked about how, if you're blind, your smell gets better, your sense of hearing gets better, and you have all this, or if you have no sense of smell, your sense of taste and hearing gets better. It's like your brain makes up for this stuff. And what is going on here is the idea that since their brains and their physical connection to their bodies has been hijacked, corrupted, maybe something happened, maybe they had an adverse reaction to something, which was pretty mandatory, and then everybody suddenly had all these autistic kids. Suddenly, after 1986. You'll notice if you look on a graph, the autistic kids really took off after 1986. That was the year, like it'll be like normal, and then bang, 1986 it goes. I don't know what happened in 1986. Might be worth looking at. Did anything happen medically in 1986? Was there some medical procedure that was brought in 1986? I don't know. But it's definitely something you want to look at. But in any case, these non-verbally communicating kids they were taught how to use a spelling board, which is essentially like a Ouija board for a person. You know, you point to letters and it spells out a letter, a number and stuff. The parents showed them how to use it, then let them go because they're like, hey, just like anybody, here's a computer, here's how you use it, there you go. And these kids using these boards with pointing to letters and stuff were suddenly able to do absolutely incredible things. Stuff that is so mind-bending that people who have seen this, have been brought to see this stuff, like literally run away. And the counter that they come up from this is that, oh yeah, those spelling boards are fake. And I'm like, what? So like the board with letters on it is a fake thing? Like, how is this? Well, you're controlling, no one's touching the kid. The kid's autistic. Okay, so you can either have it one way or the other. Either the kid's like essentially a living vegetable and can't do anything, or he's like a malevolent being who's like somehow trapped inside of his body and he's faking this how could that possibly be fake? But I'm not even joking. This stuff is considered fake. And if you watch the telepathy tapes, if nothing else convinces you that you're more than your physical body, this series will. It is some powerful, easily the most powerful thing I've seen on YouTube in this field in like 10 years. You absolutely have to check it out. I'll read a little bit from here. In a world that often dismisses the extraordinary as mere fantasy, the Telepathy Tapes dares to explore the profound abilities of non-speakers with autism. Individuals have long been misunderstood and underestimated. These silent communicators possess gifts that defy convention and conventional understandings, from telepathy to otherworldly perceptions, changing the limits of what we believe to be real. For years, the parents and teachers have quietly witnessed these remarkable abilities, knowing that in time to share their truth would eventually come. But now, as the evidence mounts, the time has come to reveal what has been hidden in plain sight. This groundbreaking series challenges everything we think to know about communication and the human mind, and essentially consciousness. And it's a beautiful series. Everybody involved in this is not lying. Okay, like. They're not lying. Nobody's lying here. They present actual evidence. There's video evidence of this. Every piece of evidence a person could want is present here. And it's about consciousness. So what is this? What does it mean? What is all this about consciousness? It seems that in this day and age, consciousness is the new currency. That's what everyone is seeking to control. Controlling your attention is controlling consciousness. The corruption from the worm is your senses are being overwhelmed. They're being overwhelmed by the news. They're being overwhelmed by social media. They're being overwhelmed, okay? And further to that, we can all see it. We can see that the lies that are going on, the corporate psyops that are happening everywhere. Chase Hughes, great guy. Check out his channel. He talks a lot about how psychological manipulation control. What do you think's happening with all these guys who are getting psych degrees and go on working in advertising or go working for all these companies that are trying to, get ahead of the next guy and control the masses? That's what this is about. It's about the elimination of memory. It's about the elimination of your ability to think for yourself, to be your own person. And I would argue that because we've lost the ability to reach back in time, to be able to look at what has come before us, because if we look back and we see what's happened at the turn of the century, like that book, Operation Trojan Horse by John Keel, verifiable reports, you begin to see a trend forming here that looks an awful lot like what Reza Jorjani calls a breakaway civilization. And what am I talking about with that? I'm talking about in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a group, there were these UFO sightings that happened all over the United States where people were flying these airships. that nobody knew what they were. And they looked kind of like blimps and all this kind of jazz, and all of a sudden, all of it went away. Gone. And it's as though that technology was scooped up by a small group of people who then began to operate independently from governments. Kind of like the book Atlas Shrugged. If you've never read Atlas Shrugged, that's a really good book. You want to check that book out. But in Atlas Shrugged, they determined that the world, you know, is kind of sick and weird. I've always wondered, you know, why Ayn Rand was really hated. I mean, she's just a woman who read some Socrates, and you'd think that, like, people would like Ayn Rand. But she was pointing out that, like, yeah, you need to be, you know, meritocracy is a thing. There should probably be a gold standard. And they just gutted her. But in her book, she talks about how all of these people who were functional had abilities just isolated. They made their own private community. They all got together and they all talked, and they created a gold standard, and they just traded amongst themselves and let the rest of the world be damned. Do what you want. And we're just going to live our own life and do our own things. Kind of like the Amish. But think of, like, instead of going against technology, they just go with it on their own, and they just don't, you know, share it with anyone. And further to that, if you had that kind of control and technology, you'd want to sabotage the others who are not in your little cult or whatever, so that they don't get that technology. Because again, if you have the knowledge and they don't, what does that mean? Right? It means that you've got power and control. Now, there's a book called The Three-Body Problem that's written by a guy with a Chinese name who I'm not even going to attempt to say, but it's a book called The Three-Body Problem. It's on the CIA's reading list, an interesting book. And in this book, they talk about these things called the Tri-Solarans, which is this alien race, and they dispatch these things called sophons, which are these beings that make it so that science stops, and we're not able to use physics. They target particle accelerators. When we try to smash particles together, discover new laws of physics. The sophons interfere with that, so we can't do that. And without consistent results from particle accelerators, the foundations of theoretical physics crumbles, making the universe appear irrational and broken, leading scientists to believe that physics is a discipline that no longer exists. So this is the book. The book's pretty interesting stuff. It's well written, it's heady stuff, and it's on the CIA's reading list for some reason. I'm not sure why that is, but yeah. So this makes me think a little bit about string theory, because of course all this stuff is connected, right? Consciousness, physics, advanced physics, T. Townsend Brown, all these guys. And then you got people who are, you know, smart, people who are in the field, like Eric Weinstein, who went, and you may have heard about this, but he was talking about how string theory was a red herring, how the whole thing has just been a way to stop people from making actual advancements in physics. And they've been destroying physicists who've been trying to make the connection, to try to, like, figure out what's going on and you know, progress science. And I've linked to a linked to an interview he did and a conflict he got into, whichever one. They always do this. There'll be a conflict where he was on Piers Morgan, of all people. I mean, whatever, take that for what it's worth, because that's going to be edited to death, you know, to forward an agenda. But yeah, why is that where only one guy's speaking out? Seems kind of odd to me, you know? And when you take that on its own, it's one thing, but you take that and you compare it with everything else. You compare it with the stuff that Reza Jorjani talked about. I'll link to his stuff. And he talks about a thing called Alternative 3, which was a documentary that came out in the 70s. Interesting stuff. They'll come out with, like, fictitious documents and fictitious movies so that people come up with a similar theory. They're like, oh, you're just getting that from that documentary. It's all just this huge controlled psyop to keep you in your cage. Agents of the worm. That's what they are. So, let's not be negative about this. All right? What's the solution? I like solutions. And the solution is you need to be self-reliant, which means that you need to not connect to infrastructure. It means that you need to be responsible for your own experience. You need to be responsible for your own thoughts. When you have being self-reliant doesn't mean that you go live in a cabin in the woods. Okay? I mean, being self-reliant means that you have a small, supportive community of people, like in the Ayn Rand book. Now, when those small supportive communities are good, they call them societies or foundations, okay? And if you want to have it last for a while, you call it a secret society. And when they're bad, they call them cults, okay? Or if they don't like you, they'll call it a cult, okay? And that's with a C. And when you begin to realize that all these media manipulation techniques that are being used, the media is being used to control consciousness. And consciousness controls your perception, your thoughts. And perception controls your reality. So you and your conscious need to be the primary source of your reality. And you need to stop these influencers from affecting your reality. Except for me, of course, because I love you. I only want what's best for you. So I'm telling you that you need to unplug. You need to work on your own consciousness. It's the only thing we can do. And that's difficult because we're all slowly swelling up and turning into these fat gas bags of lack of motivation. We're surrounded by all this negative news. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Fear is everywhere. We're just a bunch of loesch harvesting goobers. So how do we get out of that? How do we stop doing that? Well, there's certain things we can do to get past this and to build your consciousness. You can disconnect from the infrastructure. Okay? That means that, what does that mean? That means that you disconnect from this world that they're telling you to connect to, that they make it easy for you to connect to. I'm not saying you shouldn't use AI. I think AI is a really useful thing. But I'm thinking you need to control that. Instead of watching TV every night, read a book. Read a book for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes, read a book. Maybe that'll turn into 10 minutes. Okay, any book. Could be a comic book to start with. I promise you we can find something you like. You know, even if that was too much and you had to focus on an audiobook, so it was theater of the mind, I mean, we could start there. But you have to start disconnecting from this overwhelming reality which is trying to control you. Because you're a sacred being. You are more than your physical body. Your consciousness is a vital and essential thing. You need to connect with people. And I don't mean over online. Like, I'm here and I love you and stuff, but you need to connect face to face with people. And that's one of the reasons why, again, the Discord server. Is I want this to be a way that people can facilitate. It's just a method for communication so people can eventually meet up, so they can go out into the physical world and have physical experiences, so they can wake that parts of your brain and body up that allows you to develop and change. Because right now, the way we're all operating, we're developing and changing, but not in a good way. You can meditate, which I've talked about before. Every single culture in the world that has ever tried to do anything with any sort of spiritual doctrine at all, I don't care what it is, meditates. Sometimes they call it prayer. A lot of times they just call it meditation, or they do both, where they're trying to, reach out into the void, reach out through your mind to connect with something greater than yourself. Now, this is a big thing. That's a huge field, okay? And in fact, yoga, which is another thing that I'm here to tell you, yoga is amazing. I mean, I've never done any exercise that has so much return on investment as yoga. And I don't just mean focus stretching, I mean yoga. Yoga with Adrian for the win. I've talked about it before. I try to do the mobility yoga. It's, I think 22 minutes or something like that in the mornings. Try it. Just try it. I'm not saying you have to be awesome at this. A lot of the time you're going to feel like a dead walrus flopping around on the floor while this girl's being all bendy on the screen. But you have to try. Do it badly. Fail, but you must keep trying. Otherwise, they're going to take your soul. They're going to turn you into this harvested creature. They're going to keep you inside your little pod inside the Matrix. And the last thing I would recommend, and this is, I've talked about this before. I talked about it last week. Get a motorcycle. Get a motorcycle, because being on a motorcycle, first of all, I don't think you'll be able to get a motorcycle for too much longer. They've already started to come across with a lot of different rules and regulations about motorbikes that they, you have to get this kind of bike or that. And I don't just mean any motorcycle. I mean, get yourself an Enduro. Even if you get yourself a Honda Ruckus, which you don't even need a driver's license, or you don't need a special license for it, in Canada anyway. It's under 50 cc's. You don't have to worry about gearing. It's just twist and go. But it allows you to move through a world faster than you can walk and connects you with reality. And while you're there and you're on a bike, it's sort of like diving. If you've ever been diving or rock climbing or doing any of those extreme sports, it forces you to become present in your reality. It forces you to pay attention to what's actually going on around you. And with an Enduro, you have the ability to transport yourself. And I don't mean an electric bike. I mean something that takes gas. If you want to use an electric bike, that's up to you. I'm not going to get into that argument with you, okay? But what I'm saying is you need to be able to get outside. And once you're outside, being outside means that every night you spend outside, you will get stronger. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? It's like running or doing exercises. Every night that you spend outside, you will get stronger. If you spend like the day, you spend the night, and you can spend like 2 nights in a row outside, do that. It will physically and psychologically change you. It awakens something within your being. And after a while, after you do it a few times, you'll feel it. Especially if you can do it, like if you can get onto the field and be in the field for like a week and a half, it'll be really uncomfortable for the first couple of days. And it's like, you know, swimming in water that you're not used to. You start to get really good at it. And then when you get out of the water, you feel weird because it started to awaken something within you, which was always there, but they're seeking to control. Don't let them do it. Escape the cage.